The Tale of Dark Forest, Chapter 2. The next day, Cirrus snuck into the house, far earlier in the morning than she usually would. Her mother, Breeze, slept on in her own bedroom. She didn't bother with a goodbye. She loved her mother, she really did, but she wouldn't say they were that close. Not in the way most parents and children were. Her grandmother, Anne, was in the main room. She was the one who had mostly reared Cirrus from cubhood. As such, she gave a sleepy wink as Cirrus crawled back out through the window. She secured the knapsack on her back, heavy with assorted metals. It was mostly that one metal weighing it down, but she just knew it would make a good sword. A sword that hadn't been made before, and if it had, not for a long time. She shifted it again, unconsciously gripping it with her metal claws. Luckily, the strap didn't rip. As her house faded out of view behind her, personal homes were sparsely distributed about the valley, establishments in town, and the ruins being the exception. Cirrus's thoughts turned to her father. She didn't think of him often, he having been dead since she'd been born, but she found her mind straying to him. She knew that he'd been a Jelf, like her, but more hybridized, though not quite as much as her grandmother. He had been large, her mother said, even for his species, with pale indigo eyes and his pelt a soft, tawny tan color. It was hard to imagine her oddly slim mother, who was just a jaguar, next to such a giant. Arachnar had been his name. A gentle giant, if any, who'd only gone to gather periwinkles and alyssum for his wife's garden. They say he fell, though from fright or incident, who knew, hitting his head hard enough to kill him. At least that's what they could gather from where his body lay, dead among the flowers, and a boulder painted with his blood. Her mother hadn't been the same since, so her grandmother, whose real name was Suzanne, took the time to raise her until her own health fell. Mostly, it was Cirrus on her own these days, gathering and trading, or hanging out with her friends, all the while avoiding the forces. Until she caught the gleam of a sword one afternoon, when she was half a decade from her second decade of life. Then she decided she'd become a swords beast and never become one of Darkness' army. Old Mason, the town blacksmith, had taught her and Daniel. Both became quite skilled to the best of their strength. Cirrus would never notice enough to articulate it, but Old Mason was the closest thing she had to a father. She was startled out of her musings by an over-gleeful voice calling her name. She cringed, expecting some prank or unseen move to knock her down, when two sets of paws wrapped around her shoulders. Daniel and Morgan were the culprits on either side, and grinning like crows at a carcass. Daniel smiled even broader, brown eyes twinkling warmly. "So, you ready?" Cirrus smiled back just as widely. "Aye." She hefted her bag as emphasis. Turning to the fox hybrid, she said, "You?" Morgan nodded eagerly, passing the Jelf arrow. "Finished last night," she said, as Cirrus inspected the shaft. Ashy-colored wood, straighter than sun rays, was tipped on one end with a blue, granite-looking arrowhead, and tufted at the other with vivid blue feathers. If they were dyed, she couldn't tell. It was well made, the care evident in the work. Cirrus turned it this way and that, then returned it, commenting, "Very nice. But you can shoot it faster than Daniel can eat." She ignored an indignant "Hey," and noting the position of the sun, hurried them, saying, "We better move fast. Sol and Stare aren't our timekeepers. The sun is saying we better get there before Old Mason closes for his noontide nap." "And then we won't get done until the third hour," Daniel muttered. Ignoring the remark, although she agreed with it, she turned the conversation over to their soon-to-be-made swords. Since Old Mason was the town's blacksmith, and well-known, he'd offered to teach them the ways of the sword, both the wielding and the making, which they had accepted. But that was many years ago, and now they were nearly as skilled as he was. Old Mason had taught them well. Not much was known about Old Mason. He had lived in Dark Forest since before the days of Darkness' arrival. He was by far one of the oldest creatures in Dark Forest, though Mrs. Finch wasn't far behind. Only the gray in his fur and failing eyesight betrayed his age. He was fairly tall, almost 7 feet, and had a powerful build. He had hefty, with big paws, and his fur was the tawny color of lions. The only difference was that he had no mane, just thick neck fur, and fangs almost to the length of his bottom jaw. It was rumored that he had the blood of an ancient creature in him, perhaps